Tonight, we are not following the footsteps of famous presidents, celebrated generals, or legendary explorers. Instead, we are taking a slow and peaceful journey to a quiet American town that once appeared on maps, welcomed travelers, and echoed with the ordinary sounds of everyday life. Then, almost without anyone noticing, it faded into silence. Settle into your favorite chair, lower the lights, and imagine a cool evening breeze moving gently through tall grass. Somewhere beyond the hills stands a forgotten place that history nearly left behind. Our story begins during the middle of the 19th century, when much of the United States was still expanding westward. Across forests, rivers, and open prairie, thousands of families searched for better opportunities. Small communities appeared almost overnight wherever a railroad stopped. A river crossing offered safe passage, or rich farmland promised a good harvest. One such place was a tiny settlement tucked into rolling hills not far from a winding creek. It was never a large city. Even at its busiest, only a few hundred people called it home. The town had a simple wooden church with a white bell tower. There was a general store where neighbors exchanged news while buying flour, coffee, sugar, and lamp oil. A blacksmith worked beside the dusty road, shaping horseshoes as sparks floated into the afternoon air. Children walked to a one-room schoolhouse, carrying small books tied together with leather straps. Every morning began in almost the same peaceful way. Before sunrise, thin streams of smoke rose from stone chimneys. Roosters greeted the new day. Farmers stepped outside to feel the morning air before leading horses toward nearby fields. Fresh bread cooled on kitchen windowsills, while families quietly prepared for another ordinary day. Nothing about the town seemed extraordinary. That was exactly what made it beautiful. People knew one another by name. Doors were rarely locked. If someone became sick, neighbors quietly brought warm meals without being asked. During harvest season, everyone worked together from sunrise until sunset, before gathering beneath lantern light for simple meals and quiet conversation. Life moved slowly. The loudest sound was often the church bell or the distant whistle of a passing train far across the countryside. Although history books usually focus on great battles and famous speeches, places like this quietly formed the heart of 19th century America. Thousands of similar communities helped build the nation, even if very few people remember their names today. The town's post office opened before many homes even had proper fences. Letters connected families separated by hundreds of miles. Sometimes news from the East Coast took several weeks to arrive. Every letter mattered. People carefully folded each page and stored them inside wooden boxes for years. A single envelope might contain wedding news, the birth of a child, or word that a loved one would never return from war. Winter covered rooftops with deep snow. Children built snow forts, while adults gathered around warm fireplaces, telling stories that had been passed down through generations. Summer felt entirely different. The creek sparkled beneath the warm sunshine. Wildflowers covered nearby meadows. Fireflies appeared every evening, floating through the darkness like tiny golden stars. Without electricity, nights became wonderfully quiet. Families finished supper before lighting candles. Parents read aloud while children listened from handmade rocking chairs. Outside, crickets filled the cool night air with a steady rhythm that rarely changed. Looking back today, the silence almost seems impossible. There were no highways, no airplanes crossed the sky, no glowing screens interrupted the darkness. Only the gentle wind moving through tall oak trees. As years passed, the little town continued growing at a comfortable pace. A second store opened across the street. A small mill began grinding grain collected from nearby farms. Travelers occasionally stopped for the night before continuing west in search of new opportunities. For a brief moment, the future looked bright, but history often changes in ways that ordinary people never expect. Far away, railroad companies were making decisions that would quietly reshape countless American communities. New railway lines promised faster transportation between growing cities. Engineers searched for routes that avoided steep hills and difficult river crossings. One afternoon, a survey team arrived near the town carrying measuring tools and large paper maps. Curious residents welcomed the visitors. Some believed the railroad would pass directly through town, bringing new businesses, new families, and greater prosperity. Shop owners imagined serving hundreds of travelers every week. Farmers dreamed of shipping their crops farther than ever before. Children wondered what the giant steam engines might look like as they rolled past the town. For months, excitement quietly spread from porch to porch. Then the final decision arrived. The railroad would not come. Instead, the tracks would be built several miles away across flatter land. At first, nobody believed it would matter very much. After all, life had always been peaceful before trains became common. Why would one railroad change everything? The answer appeared slowly. Within only a few years, merchants moved closer to the new station. Families searching for work followed. The town's young people discovered better opportunities elsewhere. New businesses opened beside the railroad, while older shops back home welcomed fewer customers every season. The general store remained open, but its shelves slowly became emptier. The blacksmith repaired fewer wagons. The school welcomed fewer children every autumn. Nothing dramatic happened. There was no great fire, no terrible flood, no violent battle. The town simply became quieter. One family left, then another, then another. Each farewell seemed temporary. Most people believed their friends would someday return. Many never did. Years passed almost unnoticed. Grass slowly covered unused paths. Wooden fences leaned a little farther every winter. Paint quietly peeled from front porches beneath endless seasons of rain, sunshine, and snow. The church bell still rang every Sunday morning, but fewer voices answered its call. Travelers passing through noticed something unusual. The town still looked peaceful. Yet something invisible had changed. It felt as though time itself had begun walking more slowly there. Older residents often sat outside during warm evenings, watching sunsets across empty fields where children once played. They remembered weddings, harvest festivals, school picnics, and holiday gatherings filled with laughter. Now only birds sang beneath the fading evening light. One by one, familiar faces disappeared. Some families left in search of work. Others moved closer to larger towns connected by the railroad. The little community continued shrinking so gently that almost nobody outside the region noticed. Maps still showed its name, but each passing year made that name feel a little fainter. The forgotten town had not vanished overnight. Instead, it was quietly slipping into history, almost without making a sound.
As the years continued to pass, the forgotten town settled into an even deeper silence. There was no single day when someone announced that the community had come to an end. Instead, life simply became quieter with every changing season. The old general store closed its wooden doors one final evening. The owner carefully swept the floor, placed the key inside his pocket, and looked around the empty building one last time. Shelves that had once held coffee, flour, canned peaches, and handmade tools now stood nearly bare. Outside, the familiar wooden sign gently moved in the evening breeze. No crowds gathered to say goodbye. It was simply another quiet sunset. The one-room schoolhouse remained open for a few more years. Each autumn, however, fewer children arrived with their books tucked beneath their arms. Eventually, there were not enough students to keep the classroom open. The teacher packed away the maps, stacked the books neatly on a shelf, erased the blackboard one final time, and softly closed the door behind her. No one realized that it would never be opened again. The church remained the heart of the little community for the longest time. Every Sunday morning, its bell echoed across empty fields where houses once stood. The sound traveled farther than ever before because there were so few people left to hear it. One by one, the remaining families packed their wagons. Some followed the railroad toward growing cities. Others searched for richer farmland or better opportunities for their children. Many promised they would return someday. Life, however, has a quiet way of carrying people forward. Very few ever came back. Nature patiently began reclaiming the town. Wild grass covered the dusty streets. Young oak trees appeared beside abandoned fences. Morning glories climbed over empty porches. Birds built nests inside old barns where horses had once rested after long days in the fields. Rain slowly softened wooden roofs. Winter snow settled peacefully on buildings that no longer sheltered families. Every season left its gentle mark. Years became decades. Decades became generations. Eventually, even the post office disappeared from official records. The town's name slowly faded from newer maps. Travelers driving along modern highways never realized that only a few miles away, an entire community had once laughed, worked, celebrated birthdays, and dreamed about the future. Today, historians call places like this ghost towns. Despite the name, there is nothing frightening about them. Most are simply quiet reminders that communities, like people, can change over time. Across the United States, hundreds of small towns followed similar paths. Some disappeared after railroads chose different routes. Others lost their mining jobs when valuable minerals ran out. A few were abandoned after floods, droughts, or changing industries made everyday life impossible. Each town has its own story. Each one mattered deeply to the people who lived there. When archaeologists and local historians visit forgotten places like this, they rarely discover treasures made of gold. Instead, they find something far more meaningful. A child's marble buried beneath old soil. A cracked teacup resting near the remains of a kitchen. Rusty horseshoes beside an abandoned stable. Buttons that once belonged to everyday shirts. Broken glass from old medicine bottles. Small objects that quietly tell the story of ordinary lives. These discoveries remind us that history is not only about famous names. It is also about school teachers, blacksmiths, bakers, farmers, shopkeepers, and children whose lives shaped their communities in simple ways. Sometimes, an old photograph appears inside a family album. A wooden house stands proudly in the background. Children smile toward the camera. Parents stand on the front porch. Everyone believes tomorrow will arrive just as peacefully as today. None of them know that future generations will one day wonder where this town went. Standing there now, you would hear very little. Perhaps only birds singing at sunrise, the gentle sound of wind moving through tall grass, leaves softly brushing against one another high above the ground. If you looked carefully, you might still notice the outline of an old street beneath the grass. You might find the worn stones that once supported a family home. A few fruit trees may still bloom each spring, planted long ago by people whose names have almost been forgotten. In many ways, the trees remember. Their roots remain where kitchens once stood. Their branches continue reaching toward the sky, just as they did more than a century ago. Although the town itself disappeared, the land never forgot. The creek still follows the same peaceful path. The hills still welcome the morning sunlight. Wildflowers continue blooming each summer, exactly as they did when children once ran through nearby fields. Nature carries memories differently than people do. It does not rush. It does not erase. It quietly continues. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson these forgotten towns leave behind. Not every place disappears because of disaster. Sometimes, history changes one small decision at a time. A railroad chooses another route. A business moves away. A few families leave. Another winter arrives. Another spring follows. Before anyone fully realizes it, an entire chapter of American life has gently come to an end. Yet those quiet places still have stories worth telling. They remind us that ordinary lives are never truly ordinary. Every shared meal, every handwritten letter, every church bell, every child's laughter, every peaceful sunset. Together, they became the invisible threads that helped build a growing nation. So tonight, as our journey comes to an end, imagine standing one last time at the edge of that forgotten town. The evening sky glows with soft shades of gold and blue. A cool breeze drifts across the empty fields. Somewhere nearby, the creek continues its gentle song, just as it has for centuries. The houses may be gone. The streets may have faded. The people may have moved on. But their quiet story still lives, wherever someone pauses long enough to remember. And perhaps that is the most peaceful kind of history of all.